Because they made, this side and this side, instead of trying to get it down, they just made them little polished. He has to have the hall. Like I think I told you, I did that hall.
I agree, I've not seen it. Divided. Are you? 5 regions. Every 5 years,
Good afternoon. You treat me, Dave. I was told to tell you guys at Good afternoon. I'm Bill Nichols from the Antrim Historical Society, and thank you for coming out today. Great to see a big group on our first program of the year. Want to offer you, what are we having? Just water?
Water,
Water and bread. Water and bread, that's it, people. Water and goodies. And help yourself now if you'd like during the presentation, get right up there. Only because we're going to head up to the Grange if anybody wants to afterwards to see the work that's been done. So if you don't want to go up, you can stay here and have bread and water. What else did I've already forgotten what I wanted to talk about. What's this?
sign the book.
Ah, yeah, thanks. Sign the gift. You should have known by now. If you haven't signed the gift book, please do before you go.
You want those?
See how many people go up.
Okay.
So we've been busy. One of the things we've been busy is programs. We try to get the programs rolling by April through November. So we've been busy this year doing that. What else is new with the Historical Society? We had, unfortunately, Priscilla Herlin passed away last November, which was really unfortunate at 95. But we benefited from that, which is an awful thing to say. Dan and Nate and Bill have been very gracious, have been going through the house in Jaffrey, and at least 2 truckloads of stuff that I brought over to the Historical Society. We've expanded our Goodall collection, as you can imagine, the stuff that David had saved over the years. So the Goodall collection has changed a little bit since it was first put up. And to stop in and see the changes in some of the stuff that Neil's archived, some of the knives that we didn't have, and so even some of the pears I think that we never had. So anyway, we've got some exhibits. Priscilla, you want to talk about programs real quick?
Sure. Yeah, well, welcome to our first program of the year. This is exciting. So many people already. We've been working on planning programs for this season. Hopefully, we're going to get one a month through November. Just some of the ones that we have definitely so far. On May 4th, it's a program called Murder in Plain Sight. It's about the murder of an Abenaki by a settler up in Montpelier, Vermont, how many years ago? In the 1800s somehow. And that murder was never solved. But just recently, it's been solved by some of the modern methods. I don't know what they used, if they used DNA or what, but that's what we're going to find out when he comes. That's May 4th. On June 13th, we have a, what's it called, Cotswinger? You call it
Cordswinger.
Cordswinger, which is a shoemaker coming to talk to us. She's from Canterbury, and she has her own shoemaking business. She makes some really cute shoes. She's coming because her husband's father bought a farm up on Turner Hill Road, it's actually Ash Road.
Used to be Bill Prokop's place. That place used to be the cordwainer shop back in the 30s and 40s. Yeah, so.
So it was her husband's father that bought that, either father or grandfather, I think father. And what he did with it, from my understanding, is in the summers, he invited people from the inner cities up to, first of all, learn farming in Tunis. So she's gonna come and talk about that. That should be good. She's really excited about that. The other one that we definitely have planned should be really good. It's in October. It's called 13 Days in October. It's about the Cuban Missile Crisis. The guy, he's an author. I've read a couple of his books. He writes adventure books. So he's going to tell us all about that. So it should be good. Those are the ones we have definitely. Other ones are our July program, with the usual July 4th program. And we'll just looking at everything. So anyways, it should be a good year.
Thank you for so today we have Arthur Merrill and Beth Merrill from the Grange to talk about the Grange. We've been supporting the Grange over the years. First, because we think it's an important organization in town. What we did is we gave them our apple crisp that we've had for years at Home and Harvest. Let them run it and let them reap the rewards, just because we were so short-handed. And we wanted to enjoy Home and Harvest once in a while ourselves. So it was kind of nice to have them take it over and have that money to use for the repair of the meeting house. And number two is because we feel the meeting house is an important building in town, one of the most important buildings that we have. So we really want to see it get repaired, fixed up, restored. I know Andras is here too. That's fine. He's here too, and I will just step aside and let them talk about it, and then we'll go and take a look and see what's going on. Thank you, Arthur.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. When Bill asked me, or whoever it was we talked to, he probably talked to me during town meeting stuff, so I swear. I wasn't sure if you want me to talk about just the building, about the organization, so you kind of get a little of both.
Good.
About the building. Most of you know the building was built up the hill further from where it is now, this side of the cemetery, and there's a stone up there with a plaque on it that says, you know, this is where the original meeting house was and all that good stuff. They moved it down into its present location in 1832. I've always figured probably either oxen, a horse, and a bunch of men, and probably a couple barrels of rum, along with the women probably cooking lunch and dinner for them. As town grew down here, the town decided they didn't need that building, so when they built this one in the 1890s. The Grange had been started the organization had been started in 1883, and they were meeting at the vestry of the old Presbyterian Church up there. When town built this down here, they no longer needed the building up there. They offered it to the Grange. And at the time, the Grange as an organization, according to state law, could not be incorporated. So we couldn't own property. The only way we could own property was to appoint a board of trustees. And they had to work through the process and buy the building. So 3 members, Cummings, Hill, and 2 other members, bought the building for $200 from the town. Along with the building came 45 settees and a wood stove for $200. Pretty good deal. I believe the last town just went through reevaluation a couple of years ago. And I don't remember the exact number, but I believe the hall is now valued at somewhere around $150,000. I guess for $200 we didn't do too bad. I have the original warranty deed that when the Grange bought the building. Sometime while the town still owned it up there in the I think Andras told me in the 1870s or early 80s, they built on what was the stage, along with some on the front of the building as well. When they moved it, it was just the basic 40 by 40 hall that we used when we were up there meeting. For a while, we had running water from a well, the other side of the cemetery in that apple orchard, from somewhere in the 20s to the early 1970s. When I joined in 1970, we still had water. All there was upstairs was a pipe that the water just came out of the sink and into the pipe and dropped, 20 feet to the ground. Probably why there was one reason why there was more water underneath the building, yeah, that's where it all went, The building sits, as you know, right next to the road. It basically sits on what property there is. There's a little, Andras' wall kind of is the property line for the most part. So when they moved the building there, of course, it was going to be a town building, so the town didn't want to take any property than what they needed, so that's why we ended up with just the footprint of it. Years ago, when somebody else lived next door there, he came over one day when I was up there. This would have been the mid or late 70s. If you remember, there used to be a little back house to it where the bathroom was on the back of the building. He told me that was on his property. Told him, fine, you have it surveyed. It wasn't, I hope, but it's gone down anyways. So, recently we put a new roof on it the last couple of years. We got a roof up last summer on it. Through generous donations from folks in town here and through a donation, a $10,000 matching donation from Beth. My memory is bad on who we get money from.
A combination of LCHIP, Land and Community Heritage Investment Program, and from the 1772 Foundation grant that's administered in New Hampshire by the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance.
We've had a member of the Preservation Alliance, Andrew Cushing from Grafton, come down a few times. He started working on some windows with us to try to get them fixed up. They're probably the original windows. I think some of them might be the original glass. They all need a lot of work. Beth has been our main fundraiser, writing grants that she has spent many hours doing. Trying to get us some money. A lot of those are matching grants. That's why we're always trying to raise money. Right now we have a 120 Club fundraiser going on. I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but it's in my mind. You give us $20 every week. For 20 weeks we draw a winner and that person gets $20. And at the end of the 20 weeks we'll draw a winner for 100, winner for 200, and winner for 300. So if you would like to get into that after we get done talking here, Beth would be more than happy to take your money. We have 3 other members of the Grange there, sitting beside of Beth.
We'll take your money as well.
Absolutely. I'll take your money too. Any questions about the building that I can answer quickly before I move on to a little bit? Okay, cool. The organization, National Grange started in 1867, right after the Civil War, by mostly Masons. The 7 men who founded it were Masons and Oddfellows. So the structure has a lot, comes from those 2 organizations as well. We are a fraternal organization, meaning we have a ritual and a structure that we meet by. We still call our presiding officer the master, and the next in line the overseer. They have nothing to do with slavery. They come from Old English farm names. In front of me here I have 4 sashes that we wear. The blue one is the local Grange. If you've ever come to one of the awards, community awards night at the town hall, this is the ones we wear, the color we wear for that. These are green. This is the Pomona Grange color. It's a district or a county-wide Grange. This is the state sash that I presently have as the overseer of the state Grange. And these are really special. You only get these if you are a past state master or spouse and a past voting delegate at the National Grange. Most of you know, from 2006 to 2010, Beth was master of the New Hampshire State Grange. So we each have one of those to wear until we can't wear one anymore. And these actually were not new when they were given to us. They belong to a couple from Hooksett. He was master of the State Grange from 1959 to 1963. And when his wife passed, they said that the sashes should go to somebody else. We've started doing that so that we don't have to buy new ones, but it also kind of gives us a little history along with those sashes. That's those. Grange here in town started in 1883 on December 11th with, I believe, 15 people as members. David Goodall was one of the charter members. I have a list somewhere in one of these books of all the charter members. To get elected to the Grange, you have to be voted on. White balls and black cubes. Thus the term black balls. Back in the early days of the Grange, one black cube or black ball would reject the candidate. We've changed that a few times. Now it's just a majority. So, but we still use that to elect new members. The Grange, like I say, took over the building in 1894. If you notice the steps, they say 1919 on them. I have no idea why. I've looked in the records from that time period, from a little bit before, a little bit after. Nothing says, gee, in 1919 we voted to put in cement steps in front of the hall. Anybody's got a good idea why, let me know. Secretaries of Granges tend to be minimalists at times, I think. They don't always write everything down, you know? I could not find the first minutes book, but I do have some of the very early ones. This one is from 1894 to 98. And a few others there from even earlier than that. The original roll books with with the charter members. Probably none of these names are familiar, you know, even family names. George Whittam was the first master of the Antrim Grange. You know, there was a Sawyer, Governor Goodall, Buchanan's, Griffin's. You know, none of those names are familiar in town anymore, I don't think. You know, the Grange prospered a little bit. You know, we used to have harvest suppers. We did pretty well with them, but we couldn't get people to climb those 17 stairs to the upstairs in the Grange Hall now if we could do that. I know I make about 2 trips up those stairs now and I gotta go sit down for a while. It's a long ways and those stairs are steep. We still use the upstairs for some storage. And that's about all we use it for. As you know, one of the first things Andras did when he went up to start working on the building was take the fire escape, such as it was off the building, off the back of it. I don't think any of us would ever want to come down those stairs. No. So maybe someday we'll put one back up. I don't know. But like I said, we used to have harvest suppers. In the past, before we started renovation work, we had Jeff Rapsis come a couple of times and do a silent movie for us. Jeff comes and plays a silent movie from back in the 20s. And he plays a synthesizer or whatever to play the music with it. And before the movie starts, he'll tell you a little bit about the movie, about what it was. And he does them not just for Grange, he does them all over the place. And they're really, really fun to go watch a silent movie with somebody playing the music to it. You know, 5 minutes into the movie, you don't realize you're watching a silent movie anymore. You don't realize that there's a guy up there. He's playing the music live for you. You don't realize that. As you know, we used to have art shows. Hopefully someday we can get back to those where community people would put their different things in the art show there for a weekend. That was a lot of fun. Back when I joined in 1970, and shortly thereafter, we had a lot of people who are my age or younger join. So we had a very lively youth group for a while. Actually, it's how I met Beth, was in the Grange. Beth was originally from Walpole, and we met in the Grange, traveled a lot as a large gang of us pretty much. A couple other couples also met in the Grange and been married for quite a while. Like I said, I have a bunch of secretaries' records here if you'd like to look at them. Some of them are hard reading because they're in cursive writing. Luckily, none of them in mine. We had there was a Grange secretary she was secretary for about 20 years, Linda Hutchinson. She was secretary for 20 years, her handwriting is beautiful. And then for 1 year, I think she wanted to be a different officer. So they elected somebody else. I don't remember who, but his handwriting was worse than mine. Really bad. I guess they decided that was enough. They elected Linda back again. We have all the secretary's records up to the hall. We're missing one from the 60s somewhere. I don't know where it is. But that's the only one I think that we don't have from all our time. A couple other things. We have, National Grange is doing a program. You take this little thing and you take it home and you put your expired drugs in them, and then you can just dispose of them that way. That's kind of neat. We also have some new flyers hot off the press just the other day about our Grange, what we do, and a little bit of that. Of course, with an application in it too. We'd love to have more members. We have about 22 or 23 now, Beth, I think, somewhere in that range. Like any organization, we're, struggling at times. Grange in the state has just under 1,000 members now. There's Granges in 37 states, I believe, at the present time. I just went to California a couple months ago for a national conference. And most of the people there were from the West Coast, and people getting a little leery about flying, I guess. I also have some other stuff here about the early, some stuff about buying the building, and some other history that was done. I mentioned that one of the first people there, the other people who bought the building were Charles Kelsey, Milton Tenney, and John Breyer, with Frank Roach. Well, they also got $200 for, like I said, the settee, the stove and pipe, lamps, 6 small chairs and a table. I don't know if that was the stove that's still there. We don't use that anymore. We haven't used that for quite a while. The joke was we didn't let the fire department come in because, as you know, there was about 70 feet of stovepipe there. Because it went up, over, and then the chimney was in the far corner. So, and I believe the settees are the ones that are still there. And I know there's a couple others in town somewhere, a couple of them, long before I was a member, kind of left the hall. But that's the way it goes. Beth, you have anything? Yes, Steve.
In the mid-1950s,
Yep.
the Grange ran very important dances for teenagers. Very, very important. Much more scandalous, however, during the same time period. The Grange ran dances for adults that began at 9 p.m. and ended at 2 a.m. So I just let your mind go. Also, I found a 1905 program for the Grange, and 5 of the people, the officers of the Grange, had the last name Merrill. Probably will have it to you.
In 1905, my great-grandfather Warren was master.
There was an Elmer.
Elmer was my grandfather, and Leonard was his younger brother. Bertha, maybe, would be my grandfather's sister. She was the first woman to be master of Antrim Grange. And probably Warren's wife. They lived next door at what is now the Uplands. They moved there in 1900 from Deering. He became the janitor of the Grange, which meant he had to go and start the fire every meeting. He was master a couple of years. My grandfather was master. Like I said, my great aunt was the first woman to be master of Antrim Grange. My grandfather was, like I say, 3 or 4 different times. My Dad was master 3 years before I was, and then I was master for 6 years in the 70s and early 80s, and then one other year. Yes, we've been around a while. Before that, my great-grandparents would have been active in Wolf Hill Grange and Deering, and my family goes back one more generation than that in Deering, and what was Wolf Hill Grange over there. So,
I have a question.
yes,
We always direct people past the Grange to our place.
yeah,
And when they arrive, they always ask me, what is the Grange? And maybe you said it, but you have kind of like a elevator, I mean, I flounder and say it had to do with farmers, but. Can you say it?
I'm a new Grange member, and it isn't easy to
it isn't.
necessarily
I mean, you
just
could ask,
describe it in a sentence necessarily.
2 sentences, okay.
Yeah.
So I had my friend's pamphlets?
you know, it's, yeah, it's one of those things. You know, some Granges are very active in community service. Some are very active legislatively. We have a resolution process. We can write, let's say we wanted to change something here in town. We could write a better example, let's say we wanted to change something in the country, okay? We could write a resolution here in Antrim, pass it at our Grange, that would go to the state Grange. If they pass it, it would then go to the national Grange, it would then become part of our legislative policy. We have a legislative director who is in Washington DC, and he deals with congressmen and senators and various agencies working on our behalf on those resolutions that we pass. So if there's something that you want to change, you know,
It's nonpartisan.
we have the ability to help that along.
Was it originally founded for farmers, as a union for farmers?
It was originally founded for farmers and rural people to kind of give them a chance to socialize. Back in the 1860s, you know, right after the Civil War, you know, if you lived on a farm, you were lucky to get off the farm very rarely. So this gave them a chance to maybe come together, talk about farming, or whatever. It was started by, the main founder was a guy who was born in Boston. His name was Oliver Hudson Kelly. He moved to Minnesota, and his farm is right on the bank, the farm he had is right on the banks of the Mississippi River, now about 45 minutes north of Minneapolis. We've been out there a couple of times. But he worked for the federal government at the time. And President Andrew Johnson sent him south in 1866 to check on agricultural conditions after the war. Now, of course, a Yankee going to the south in 1866 was probably not the best idea. Okay? Mr. Kelly was a Mason, so he had that to help him along. So he would tell, you know, I'm a Mason, you know, so he could travel in the south and you know, so he could talk to people that way. So he came up with the idea that not only farmers but rural people as a whole needed an organization where they could come together. Shortly after it started, yeah, the Grange started fighting the railroads. They had co-ops where they bought stuff in bulk, things like that. But it's evolved into, you know, community service and things like that. We have a ritual that we do at every meeting, open and closing ceremony, some marching round. If you want to join the Grange, you have to come to at least one meeting. It's changed over the years now. When and Beth would be the same way, they would vote on you at this meeting. You could come next meeting and take the first two degrees. The local Grange consists of 4 degrees. Each one of those degrees represents a season of the year. And you get marched around to the different offices, and they give you instructions as to things about life and things like that that will help you along. You could take the first 2 degrees one night, then you go home. You come back the next night and take the 3rd and 4th degrees. Now you're a full member. Now you can sit in the meetings. The Pomona Grange is the 5th degree, the state is the 6th, and the national is the 7th. And there's also a junior Grange, I forgot to bring one of the junior collars. The junior kids have little collars, because they're from 5 to 14, so the age range is pretty high. So instead of trying to make them wear these, they have just a collar that they wear with their officer insignia on it. We had one for a couple of years, but leadership is hard to find for kids nowadays, so. But that should help you a little bit with what the Grange is. Pat?
What a lot of people don't know is the Grange started the Teamsters Union as a way to get their things to market. And if you know, a lot of the Teamsters don't know it. If you notice on their insignia, you have the big wagon wheels. That's because the Grange started the Teamsters Union.
A woman in Michigan was the one who started 4-H. FFA came out of the Grange. We were big in getting rural-free delivery going and parcel post. So then you had to come to town once a week or so to get your mail. You know, but now the Grange fought for that for a long time, to get rural-free delivery. Any other questions? Yes?
Did did the Grange buy the current building from the town before or after the Center Presbyterian Church blew up?
I like you say blew up.
What happened now?
You're of the grown-up the church camp.
Dynamite.
Excellent, excellent, good. Because I know there are some of you who are gonna say they tore it down. I agree with this gentleman, they blew it up.
Intentionally.
Ralph Curlin said it.
Intentionally, they blew it up, yes. Because they had built this one, they had built this church downtown and said that you can't have two churches. So they blew it up. We have one of the pews from that church in the Grange Hall. I don't know when they blew it up. Does anybody know what year they blew up?
Was this church?
94?
No, it was between 98 and 99.
That they blew it up?
There's not the issue of the town paper. It's
Yeah.
missing from 1899. Or at least it's not online. And so it's not in 1898, and it's not in 1900, so.
So they must have blown it up in 99.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would have been afterwards then.
But Ralph Curlin found, as a very little boy,
Mhm.
said, would go hunting for bricks.
For bricks.
And they were.
So let's go with they blew it up theory, okay? Come on, it makes for a much better story, doesn't it? You know? Come on, it makes a much better story than, you know.
I like it, it's one faction blew it up and the other faction didn't go.
That could very, you know, one group who wanted to keep it for someone, but the church higher up said they couldn't have it. They had to do something with it, so they blew it up. Today's Grange, like I say, is mostly, we do a lot of community service, we do dictionaries for third graders a lot of times. Some other organizations don't do that, but we've been pretty big in that. We help the food pantry, we help, you know, whatever. We had a community garden for a few years, but that kind of got away from us a little bit with us doing some other things. I know they were supposed to have a meeting yesterday that got rescheduled because something about bad weather yesterday. Yeah. Maybe next week they're gonna talk about getting a garden going again there, whether it's there or somewhere else, I don't know. Yeah, we're still busy. Next month, we're having our community awards night over at the town hall on the 21st, I think it is. Well invited to that. We will be making our decisions this week, I think, at our meeting, who's gonna get those awards. Beth, do you have anything to add?
I sure do.
I'm sure she does.
You're very disjointed here in that
Yeah, I
earlier
know.
presentation. You forgot the important thing about the importance of women in Grange. I don't know how you could have forgotten.
No, I have not. Grange was the first organization to allow women to be full members
From the beginning.
from the beginning. Mr. Kelly, who was the main founder, his niece, he was conversing with her. She lived in Boston at the time. He was conversing with her during his trip south in 1866. And she pretty much told him, you know, if this is going to make it go, you got to have women too. So she was the first woman to be an officer. There are 4 offices in the Grange that can only be filled by women. So there are three ceremonial officers that basically have something to do when we confer the degrees. Then one is the lady assistant steward who does a lot of marching around and during the opening and closing ceremony. Beth was National Grange lady assistant steward for 6 years. She got to travel around to other parts of the country. Beth was the first woman here in New Hampshire to be our state master. We now have our second one. The first woman to be a state master was back in the 1890s, a woman from Minnesota. Most of the states now have had at least one woman be state master. There's still a few that haven't. Most of them now have had at least one. Anything else, Beth?
National Grange currently, their immediate past master and the current, National Grange is going with the modern names, but the current national president is a woman.
Yeah, the first one was elected in 2015. She was a woman from Pennsylvania. This one is from the state of Washington. Yeah, National Grange is trying to, and some of the state Granges have gone to president, and the office I presently hold, overseer, in a lot of places that's called vice president. Actually, to be truthful, they're going to have to take us kicking and screaming to do that. We know where the names came from. We know what they mean to us. And like I say, where they came from in this organization. So to us, master and overseer is fine. But you know how some people are nowadays. I see a question in the back.
Yes, I'd just like to congratulate this group on all the community programs they put on and what they've done for Antrim.
Yes?
How many Granges are still running in this country?
In the country, there are presently 34 in New Hampshire. There's Granges in, I believe, 36 or 37 states, so there's probably somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 local Granges. California, West Coast, of course, those states are bigger out west too. California, Oregon, Washington are all very big. New York and Ohio and Pennsylvania are still very big. Pennsylvania was very big agriculturally. Maine at one time, years ago, had a local Grange that had 1,000 members. Where did they meet? You know? Yes?
I would just like to add in terms of, what the benefits of Grange membership are, is that also within Grange, there's lots of fun things to do, like art contests, creative contests, like creative writing or different kinds of arts. There's craft weekends that are hosted at the State Grange building quite frequently. So there's lots of different opportunities to just express yourself creatively and, be part of a community sort of experience that, that is fun. And all other benefits too, like, I think there's like travel, discounts and,
Yep.
stuff like that. Fun stuff.
There's chances to travel to visit other Granges. One of my other jobs, and Beth also has the same job, we are what is called a deputy state master. It's shortened to deputy. We are assigned Granges throughout the state to go visit a couple times a year. I've been doing that for about 40 years, I guess. So
You wanna talk about driving to Colebrook?
I drive to Colebrook twice a year to visit the Grange in Colebrook. Yeah, it's only 175 miles each way. I mean, we go to National Grange stuff and we talk to people from California and Montana and, they don't measure stuff in miles, they measure it in hours. How far they gotta go. So 175 miles one way isn't that big a deal. Yes?
Is the numbering of the Granges within a state, so for like Grange 98, does that mean we're the 98th Grange to be established in New Hampshire, or is it
Yes.
nationwide?
No, in New Hampshire. So every state has a number one. The first one here in New Hampshire was in Exeter, and they are still active. there have been 360 organized in New Hampshire. There's 34 left. In the early 50s, there was 288, I believe, in the state, and about 30-something thousand members. Yeah. We're down to, I don't remember the exact, but it's under 1,000 now, I know that. Any other questions? Beth, do you have something?
Well, I believe that the real reason why we're here is our current project that we have going
Yes.
on, and I'm not sure that everyone's gonna want to go out, Nicole, be going to the site.
Right.
I wondered if Andras,
Yep.
who is our savior, is
Yes.
prepared
Yes.
to talk about
Yes, absolutely.
what he's been doing there before we go there.
Yes,
I'm gonna stand up.
yes, you are.
Am I standing up?
You gotta tell
Want me
me.
to say something?
Yes.
Tell us how you got into this.
Yeah, how did you get into this and why? And
I was tricked into looking at the foundation. And one of the stones had fallen out probably, 50 or 60 years ago, maybe even older than that. The original foundation, the 40 by 40 section, has what looks like sill stones. But they're thick and they're on rubble. So it's almost like bowling balls. But the building amazingly held its position. And part of it is because they poured those concrete steps, because if you eyeball the building, you see all the granite sills are tipped a little forward, and some of them aren't making any contact at all, and it's amazing that the building didn't sink into the ground. So, but just to backtrack a little, I have to say about the history of the town and of why they put the building at the top of the hill there. The town was incorporated, I believe, in 1775 or 6, and the town fathers got together and decided to hire a surveyor to find the geographical center of town, which was at the top of that hill. And so a little village did develop, but it's so steep and so hard to get in and out. So then the building they built there, that took about 6 years to build, they laid out the cemetery in 1776, I believe. And I did some work on the wall there too, I'd like to throw that in. But, so then they started the building on the south side of the cemetery, and they built this amazing building. It was, I think, 40 by 50 with 2 fully enclosed porches at each end, and it was a 2-story building with a full attic. Now you have the 1 story. And so when they moved it, they didn't move the building as a whole.
Right.
They took it apart and moved it down the hill and built a 40 by 40 on those like siltstones you see there. And then they decided it was too small, so they added 10 feet to the main floor and went up for the stage and added another 10 feet. And it made sense to put the stage there because you're on the hill and they didn't excavate. So that last 20 feet is what I got involved in because it was put on ground and rocks. But I'm amazed at how the building stayed where it is. So now, the neighbors did a survey and found that we did have 11, 12 feet behind the building. So we're putting in my friend Pete here, who's helping me with his excavator and his hands and his foolishness to do this kind of work. Well, we've worked a lot together. So we're putting in the retaining wall because when I first started working there, the ground was actually above the sills. And Todd Breyer, who's doing the woodwork, knows, and Charlie, who cut the wood for us, we've replaced 80 feet of those sills, 40 feet on the gable end, which is how wide the building is, and then 10 feet on one side and about 20 or 30 feet on the other, whatever 80 is, I lost track. But we did, so now I had started repairing the stone foundation, not knowing that we had the extra 10 feet, so I did start that. You'll see the beginnings of it there. But went to the retaining wall, because that's so important to save the building for, you know, if it's gonna be there another 50 or 200 years or whatever. So, also we have, because the building was on the ground, the west end is open so we could get in and out of there. I hated to do that, but we opened up that west end, and then the rest of it, the 10 feet, was dug by hand. And we used to come along, you know, chain or rope or strap a stone and attach it to a tree and pull it out with a come along. We did many stones that way from under the building, and some of them are hammer drilled so they could be small enough to move. And then now, you can see under the entire building, and the water can drain downhill. So it's all going in the right direction, okay? And hopefully we get to rebuild the rest of the actual foundation. But this year, our goal is to finish the retaining wall. We're right now, the west end is complete, and the last, 60 feet, 50 feet, needs another 3 feet. And we want it to be high enough so it's safe for the neighbors, it's a fence for them, it's an 8-foot high wall for us. So it's the Great Wall of Antrim.
And they didn't use any dynamite either.
Not yet. We haven't gotten that frustrated. Yeah, the timeline is interesting because, they added on in 1879 is what I wanted to say. So that building has been sitting like that for that many years, just rotting into the ground but not sinking or moving anywhere. So it's pretty impressive. And, you know, I love history, so part of the reason I'm up there is because it's a historic building, and, you know, it's me, so.
Andras, what year did you start?
I first looked at it in 1817. In 2017, and then I started the year after. And I discovered right away I made a big mistake in thinking all I had to do was repair the sills. But yeah, you know, it just.
No good deed, right?
You know, what was really funny about that was I had finished repairing the stone wall at the top of the hill and then ran a wing wall to where the stone is with the plaque on it. And when I finished that wall, I went down to pick up my mail, and Sonny Hugren comes up to me and asked me to go look at the Grange. So he's the one that got me up there, and we had a meeting up there. You showed me the stone that fell out, and Sam Harding was there, and he said, no, that's not the problem with the building. He said it needs work back there, so he was also involved.
And actually, the problem was all those dances Steve went to.
A lot of stomping.
Well, we had our wedding reception in there. How many people? We had like 150 people there, and the building held up fine.
I have a question about the water. My grandparents were big rangers, and I remember as a child going up to different events and the harvest dinners and the water coming out of that. I remember that. So at this point, do you have any running water? Will you have any running water?
No.
No.
A couple of our members have asked for that, and Beth and I both said absolutely not.
You can't because.
So no running water and no facilities. Is that correct?
Right. Well, there is a composting type toilet
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is what we had there, but the water used to be gravity feed from the top of the hill and go up to the second story.
And of course, it was put into the 20s, so you know what that pipe is.
We found that
I
pipe,
remember
what
that
was left
fire,
of it,
fire escape going on that
Yeah,
fire.
yeah.
yeah.
We discussed a couple times, and a couple of us said absolutely not, we will not have running water. There used to be a two-holer in the back of the building. Yeah. We kept,
You have the seat.
yes, we
Yeah, they have the seat
we have
for
the
the
seat.
two-holer.
It's just one of those things you keep, right?
It's a beauty. Honey,
Andras Lazar, he mentioned that they did some excavation by hand, and I just think that you all should just stop and let that kind of flow over you. They were under that building, digging,
Yeah.
we have special rates
I watched
for
a
that.
lot of
you know,
DIY shows.
bent over. He's not a young man to be.
No.
He
was when he started.
There's a couple of other things, so I just think that's pretty amazing. I mean, I saw him come home every night, egg exhausted.
The worst of it wasn't even the rocks and the dirt, it was the roots from that tree that,
Yeah, well, trees are amazing.
oh my God.
A couple other things that you said that I think really deserve sort of pointing out. And you mentioned Pete. You should, he has a full name, Pete Ryder. Pete has been really fabulous in helping Andre, their partners, you know, his excavating machine and his skills. I think he deserves to be acknowledged.
He's a retarded aerospace engineer. Took up stonework as a hobby, and then we met at Stone Trust in Vermont.
So,
But wait a second.
no.
Better call the police.
I do. So you mentioned Charlie, and I think we should all know Charlie Levesque and his son Galen.
Yeah, Galen's property is where
They
the wood
they
came
cut
from.
down the hemlock and they've sawn it on their portable mill, brought it over, and
And then my husband
And
crawls
then-
under there and puts those big pieces
yes,
in.
and I wasn't done, Linda.
Okay.
And I think the next person, Todd Breyer, as Linda said, has been working underneath the building. I don't know all of what you do, Todd, because
either.
I can just imagine that it's just as backbreaking as what Andre's doing. And I think you should tell us a little bit about what you're doing too.
Well, I do want to mention one more person that made all this trouble here. Is when I first started, I was doing a repair until Martha Pinello walked by one day and said, "What? It's a historic building, you should do a restoration." So we looked into that right away. I was like, yeah, that's what I should do.
The amazing thing about this group of people is that, well, there are Secretary of the Interior standards, there's all this bureaucratic permitting kind of stuff. This group of people understood this because they understood the spirit of the building. And Todd has said this over and over again. It is the place where things happen. It is not the place. And because of that, and because of all these people using their skills, their resources, have made this pretty much whole again. It's taken a long time, yes, but when you look at what's been going on, people lying on their backs, on their bellies, people lifting stones, and people bringing stones from all over the region and logs down the hill. This couldn't be, in my mind, a better continuation for this building for the next generations to come. So yes, but it is tough because you think you can just fix this one piece. And I always refer to it as like pulling the thread on a sweater. And the next thing you know, the damn things, you don't have any more sleeves.
Todd, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing.
Well,
Well, Andras asked me if I would help him, replace a couple of pieces of sill. They started out with just a couple of 20-foot pieces of hemlock. Learned pretty quick that it's not a two-person operation to yard those around. So we redid the sill, I don't know what year we did that, that was a while ago.
That was 2-3 years ago, it wasn't that long ago. We were
Seems
still
like-
younger then, though.
And we worked those up and got those under the building. Actually, one of the first things we did was snap the line on the west wall, the back gable.
Yep.
To the height that they need to go in, those were below grade. So we cut actually the end of the old studs off and rotted to a line, and set our sill to the framing rather than the other way around.
Yep.
Brought it up and established the back wall. We matched the tenons, or the mortises for the tenons that match the beam that's on the back of the stage, so that if the project ever finishes, the stage floor gets put back in, it's all milled and ready to go. And while I was there doing that, I just said, well, take a look at the beams underneath and tell me what you think. So last year we replaced essentially the sill beam that goes underneath the back of the stage. And all the old floor joists.
Yeah, 18 floor joists.
Yeah.
How long are they? How heavy are they?
10
I don't know how heavy they are.
They're 10 feet long.
They're 10 feet
They weigh
long.
a
And it
couple
takes
of pounds.
2 or 3 of them to put it up, and they have this metal thing under there that helps them. Yeah.
It's just, but Charlie built out it's very much how things would have been a few hundred years ago, because you probably could have seen most of the trees standing from the Grange before they got milled. They were almost within eye shot of the Grange before they ended up in the building, which is.
Yeah, and the historic buildings around, for us tree people, hemlock was used a lot. Hemlock has had a resurgence. It's being used more now than it was 50 years ago. Structurally, it's a softwood species that is light but very strong, so we used it back then, we're using it now. A lot of old buildings also had chestnut in it. We have no chestnut remaining, although there's a huge international effort to get chestnut growing again. It dominated the forest all the way down to the Carolinas, back when we lost that to a chestnut plant. And the other species that was often used for timber is oak, primarily red oak, but black oak and some white oak. So those are the main ones. So this building had a lot of hemlock in it. I'm pretty sure all the floor joists and all the retaining sections in the back top that you worked on.
The original 40 by 40 has chestnut 4x4s.
Okay.
And then the 10 feet they added on,
Was
and
the
the 10
hemlock.
feet
But
plus,
the
that
floor
was
joist-
all hemlock.
The floor joists were hemlock.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
They're all hemlock except the last one, the last of the 18 was
Oh,
oak.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Was one oak, floor joist,
because they used whatever they had probably at the time. And they're not squared, the floor joists are not squared, they're sawed on one side like they would have been done back then. And, a couple of you have talked about the work that Andras and Todd have done. You cannot believe it. If you're not going, I'm sorry that you're not going, because I don't really know how they've done what they've done. And I've been there many, many times. And so it's really amazing work. And so, again.
I was telling Charlie that his version of the floor joists are structurally more sound than the original, because they were so into saving time and money and wood that the half saws were actually sawn in half. So you had a lot of bearing but not a lot of strength. His are sawn off the top, so they're super strong. So we can have 500 people in there.
Arthur,
Steve's dance?
Yeah, we schedule dances.
I didn't want to get off the track here, but I have another question. It's a two-part question. One is, do you have a get back in date? And two, what can we do to help? Besides financially, is there anything else that we can do to support you to get back in the building?
Can I answer this?
Yeah.
Well, what I want to say about that is the building is usable except for the stage behind the stage area. They have it roped off because for a while the bottom of the stage was opened up so we could lift the floor. Eventually I thought I would do that, but Todd ended up doing that. As he got all the floor joists replaced, that floor went from sagging about 6 inches to maybe 3. It couldn't lift it all the way. So now the stage is properly re-supported and it still has to be finished off.
Yeah.
If
It's
not,
the back section is level with the foundation side to side, but
Yeah.
it still has about a 3 inch.
so it's structurally sound and safe to use, but you're not gonna be able to use the backstage area for a while. And the timeline depends on when we rebuild that back of the building, which we don't know, which,
We could probably meet, as long as I can remember, we didn't meet up there in the winter. I mean, we've met all over town, presently we're meeting here all the time. But we used to meet at the Oddfellows Hall, which is Edmonds now. We used to meet upstairs there. I don't think you get most of us to climb those stairs now either, if you had to. We could meet up there in the summer part if we want, but right now, we don't want you to go in the building anyways. There's a lot of stuff in the building that we need to get rid of. Bob?
When you look at the total scope of the project, where you want it to be when you're all said and done, and I know it's subject to how fast you can get the funding.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea of what the dollar number is that you need to put it in a place where you want it to be?
Beth is shaking her head no.
someone has to win Powerball.
Yeah, I keep trying. I think one of the estimates we had at one time was around 250, but that was, with the price, probably looking at three to 400,000 now.
And I don't know what you're thinking above the foundation that's not going anywhere for another 6 million years, but what's above it that you need to do to get it to where you want it?
The inside has taken a lot of damp,
Weather,
a lot of weather damage, not physically water, but just moisture.
Yeah, the walls are peeling.
Yeah.
And the ceiling too.
Yeah, it's a tin ceiling in the main hall, so that will need to be scraped and painted. It was last painted 25 years ago. That needs to be done. The walls are horsehair plaster, and those are peeling, whatever.
Yeah.
So that would have to be, try to find somebody who does horsehair plaster now, That might be
Liz Robertson once took me up to the Grange, and what she wanted to show me was the roof framing from the inside of the attic, and there's some sort of architecturally significant double hung infrastructure in there.
You can't describe it, you have to see it. I mean, but sometime.
Is that still functioning as it should?
Yes. The roof is fine now.
The roof is good.
Yeah, the roof is good. Sometime,
Well, that's the first step.
what we hope to do is, at our next meeting, is set a date when some of us can get up there and at least get the main hall so that we can have an open house, we can have people come up and at least look at that. And if somebody has the willingness to climb those 17 stairs, to go upstairs, back down again.
I'll do it. I'll do it all day, Arthur Merrill. Up and down.
Up and down, great, okay.
Well, they're also an 8-inch rise, that's why they're so difficult.
Yeah.
I'll still do it.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot, Andras. This might be the group to mention also, Before we can, really get going on getting the foundation complete, we need to design the new entrance.
Okay, I was gonna mention
Maybe
that,
somebody here
right.
knows somebody.
Yeah, so, as was mentioned, the bathroom used to have a ramp up to the stage area, and there was an opening back there, but I thought the bathroom should be off to the right of the entry now, which is a storage area. But the handicap entry to the building should be on the west side, where I had completely opened the building. That part of the building will have a section that will only ramp up a little bit, and then you come right in at floor level, instead of having to go up to the stage height. Come right in at floor level. And you have to have a wider opening. So that doorway goes from a 32-inch to a 3-foot wide. But we need someone to draw up the plans so that Todd can do the work. Some direction. We need some direction there. Like, you know, if you come up, if you have some idea that you can draw this thing out for us, then, you know, we can look at it right there, and you'll know what I'm talking about.
Well, also, part of that deal is, the L-chip grant that we got, we had to sign a 5-year stewardship agreement. So anything like that changes the building, we have to go through them and get approval to be able to make changes like that.
That is a major change, but I think that would be something that they would approve.
I think
because
so, but it's just another step to do.
It is, it is. They told us, well, one of the things that's funny about them is, you know, they want to keep the concrete steps because it's got the 1919 on there.
Even though we don't know why.
Well, we're offering to do granite steps that are not 8-inch rises, but 7. Easier to get in and out, but, you know, if you want to keep your concrete steps with the 1919 on there, that anchor the building, keep it from...
I've spent a lot of time sitting on those steps.
Is there gonna be any heat in the building when you're done?
When the Oddfellows were meeting there for a while, they installed a pellet stove.
Yeah.
They also funded the beginnings of the work, I think.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
They
they
helped
were
out some.
very good.
But they installed the pellet stove.
And then I kicked them out of the building because they
Right.
took up too much space.
Yeah, we still have some of their stuff upstairs.
They didn't mind because they were disbanded.
Um,
And it was just a storage area for
Yeah.
them, so, you know, that was Sam Hardy, he was very good about it.
I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we're meeting up there in the winter. There's no parking, I mean, very little parking.
You'd need 4 pellet stoves.
Yeah, and there's as much insulation in this little podium here as there is in the Grange Hall. I mean, there's,
Which is something you could do in the future, is it needs to be recited, but no, he's like, no.
wooden power wall, you know, down and back.
So one of the things Bob had asked about where we are and what was needed. One of the things is, I think because this group is so understated in their talents and their efforts, that to think back, there was the roof and the siding, the dormers were fixed, the foundation, and the building has been painted from time to time, obviously, that has to be redone. But a absolutely amazing woman named Mae Williams, and some of you may know her dad, Christopher Williams, who just passed away, an incredible historic preservation person and architect. Mae took on the structures part of this building and looked at it in a way that, even though a bunch of us look at it every week or so, she took photographs that are just, you go like, oh my God, I forgot how cool that is or something. So there is the interior, the idea the interior does need to be taken care of. But because the Grange is so strong at, we'll make do, our programs are for the citizens, not for the building, sometimes that gets left behind. So that I do think eventually we'll be talking about grants for restoration plastering, and there are a couple of people, there's not many, as I have been reminded, the person here in town had a lung transplant. So that, you know, it's not a good profession for your health, particularly. But we'll be moving towards that sort of thing. But what's wonderful about this building, and the interior as well as the exterior is, and the framing, is that it's been so preserved in a way that people who know about meeting houses, who know about Granges, can see symbols, can see aspects that are wonderful, and how we can preserve those is going to take a little bit of sorting, but also a chunk of money. And for those of you who looked at all those meeting houses that got repaired a while back for the 250th anniversary, there's probably, I think there's 7 or 9 of them in this region. All of those projects were between, the smallest I think was 250 and they're up to 450. So we're kind of in that range, but that doesn't really hold true for this group because people are so generous and so kind about what gets donated. But I do think there is a reality of particular tradespeople who are maybe from out of town who need to help out. Unless somebody chooses to take up historic preservation plastering in town, there's a lot of training for that. If you'd like to, I'll help you get in that trail if you'd like.
We've got our 250th coming up in 2 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it would be really nice to, we'd be able to get people in there to celebrate it. So maybe if there's something we can do to make that happen.
That's a good goal.
That's it, you know.
When I was in California a couple months ago, they took a group of us in a bus out to dinner at a Grange Hall on Saturday night. And that Grange Hall in California is known as the oldest continually used hall as a Grange Hall in the country. I have to tell them that our building is older than theirs. Because our building, even, you know, not even the 1785 part, just the 1832 part is older than their building, because they built theirs in the 1870s. So our building is older than theirs, but it's, you know, theirs has been continually used as a Grange Hall since the 1870s. So I made sure they knew that. Any other questions we can answer? If me or Andras or Todd or Charlie or whoever? Beth, do you have anything else? I guess then we're gonna go to the Grange Hall.
You gonna park at the Stone Church maybe, walk up the hill?
That is probably the best thing to do. As you know, there's no parking at the Grange Hall. Because
Yeah. So, this is a somewhat loose group, and I spent a career driving loose groups around in the woods, so I'm going to try to gather you together for my husband so that we don't end up being here till midnight. So what do you want to say here, honey?
Well, we were gonna start up back there, but we'll start here. And what you see here of these stones are these big slabs are gonna be hammer drilled down to shape for the new sill stones.
By hammer drilling, you mean?
We drill holes and put in a little wedge or a big wedge, depending on how much of a stone we're splitting. And these two pieces called feathers. The feathers go all the way down, the wedge stays at the top, and you put them all in and you tap them, and it creates a crack and the stone splits. Especially this kind of granite will be very cooperative. It doesn't always work with boulders out of the woods, but we do that too, and you'll see a couple of stones on the end of the wall here that were shaped out of just boulders off the ground. But granite is much easier to work with.
And there's no dynamite left from the church.
Well, I had heard historically that building was let to rot because the new church in town, nobody was coming up here, and it was basically abandoned. So there are two different stories. Some say it was blown up, some say it was just left to go, but that's not what we're here
Well,
about.
according to Parades and Promenades, they had 24 hours notice to remove the fuse and things. And,
if you want to see what the building looked like, this is an example of the building. This one here is in Newport. It was a very substantial building. And that you were not going to go and take the building apart brick by brick with a hammer. Okay?
It's just going to fall apart.
No, it isn't.
May have
No,
used
brick buildings don't. No. So the only way to take
technology to take it down. But this building is on Route 10, 12, 10, 12, 10 in Newport. Just south of the 103 intersection. That goes to Claremont.
The documents that
Well, what we should do is go around this way and view the work, and then you can see what stonework they're doing.
You've seen it. I mean, are they still quarrying?
No, these are remnants. So these are leftovers and rejects because they had some fault to them. They didn't break right, or
So
they just
lying
weren't
there?
usable to them. So they sell them. There's the Fitzwilliam Quarry was huge. At one time they employed 300 people, but when concrete came into existence, all those quarries went out of business, and now there's remnants.
Yeah. So between like 1860 and 1935 or thereabouts, virtually every quarry except for the ones doing curbing went out of business. And nowadays, like, you'll find quarries in the middle of the woods. There's just a bunch of rock. It's like they all came into work. The boss said, "We're done." They all picked up and left.
Yeah.
The other thing is that when you look at modern quarry operations, only about 10% of the stone ends up in the product. 90% of it's waste because it doesn't meet the standard one way or another. So that's what they call a grout pile.
You can see that in Concord as you're heading north. If you look, there's this whole scree of huge blocks that they have determined that aren't going to work for them. And they'd be perfect for us, but I don't know if they're willing to.
A historical fun match here, that the Stone Trust is so wonderful, and who else has volunteers who bring you granite? You know, it's just like so cool.
What is the Granite State?
Yes, but some of the
Yeah.
some of the granite that was brought was from Reigate, Vermont. And at first we were like, oh no, this isn't New Hampshire granite. Is this going to work with the grant and everything? I said, no, remember, Reigate is a Presbyterian community. There are very few Presbyterian communities along this part of New England, and Reigate is considerably north. So we had this big piece of Reigate stone that ties these communities together.
The word is continuous.
Yes, that's yeah. So what it means that chances are we already know that the people in Reigate knew the people in Antrim and in Londonderry. So this is part of a larger community that happened in the past and now is happening now.
Hit again because this is a donation from Reigate. Yeah. And all the capstones there are from Reigate. Now, if you view the wall, if you view this, what I was talking about, the building kind of moving, you can see how the granite sills are leaning out.
Oh, look at that.
They are. If it wasn't for those stairs, this whole thing would have been downhill. You can see, come by the drill holes that were used to feather and wedge to shape these. These were like 3 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot blocks and been split into pieces for the caps.
Wow.
Yeah, again, did you mention that these are the drill holes?
Yeah.
And they're split. And these are boulders that were split down to make this cheek end. And you can see the drill holes there. used a bigger drill bit because granite is more cooperative than this type of stone. So sometimes we use as big as 1 inch, but they make them even bigger than that. So with granite, you can go ½ inch. A lot quicker and easier. Huh? This is feldspar.
That's what you'd find in your field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all over the world. You see it everywhere.
Are you ending here at the end of this wall?
Yeah.
That's the end of the wall. Yep. And as far as the new sills go, that laps into the old sill there. So this is all new. Sill back here.
Yeah, because I've never been in.
If you go,
Arthur and Beth looked at that. So they
You can bend down and
Might have to bring some dirt out.
all the floor joists. Yes, bring the dirt out. See 18 floor joists. Aha. Right?
We don't have to, we got
Also, having to air out, I mean, this is not very mildewy in there, right?
Well, yeah, it was, this was the part that was hand dug out. And, you know, it looks like there's not much room here, but this wasn't here. So there was a little bit more room for us, but all of this was on the ground.
But
That's why we
in place,
opened it all up, so we had access to
the
that.
ends. And that's these beams.
That's just the bar. So
God bless Peter, because Peter with his excavator.
Yeah, that's called Wayne.
In the building.
And
but
then
yeah,
sometimes,
this is-
you know, part of the tree stays there, like this here. Take away from the strength of it, Wayne.
The length of the beams, and then off the center, if you don't have to square that.
Oh, you're fine, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Well, they're all clustered there, it doesn't matter, it's okay. They have questions, they'll ask.
Who wanted to see the stage?
Get, so all beam parts.
So that, you know, your work is going to be there for.
Well, originally, the holes, they're drilled and then split, and then depending on how well they split.
Yeah, the pump batter. Yeah. Walls are like people, you know. Take it short of the water.
It adds stability, right?
Yeah.
So you're more stable. You did this, right?
With on the floor.
Have you ever been to the stone show?
Oh.
Fire escape, that door there.
Because I think there was
And there's the lead pipe.
property line.
Straight out. And we excavated this.
Trestle to get it.
The water?
Yeah.
The water was down here. There was a pipe down here that went up inside the building, and there was so much gravity feed that it went up.
So there was a hammer?
No, it was gravity feed. There was so much surge from the top of the hill. Yeah, higher up there. Oh, yeah, way. And it ran such a distance that it just gushed out.
That's great. See, I love this. To me, when you see it in this condition, you picture it being extra. What are you doing, Joe?
Everybody's talking about water. The problem here is not getting water, it's getting rid of the water.
Yes.
There's no place to put a septic, no place to.
Uplands can tell you that what comes off this hill and hits into that culvert down there.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
Now, will this be all stone in here, underneath this, or?
There was just stone under the sill that was completely rotted out, and the
Yeah.
rest was ground. Yeah. There's ground from here down, but the ground was up to here when I started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
all
will
of
you
this was rotted
bring
out.
this up here with you?
Yeah, the ground just came to here.
No, are you
No,
gonna, is this gonna become stone again?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I'll bring the two-sided wall up to here and then granite.
I see, yeah.
So it'll look something like that.
Yeah,
The
right,
corner.
yeah, I saw that.
That's what it's gonna be, yeah. Yeah.
It is gorgeous. Like, I love when people make it. Because it's so uneven, and yet it appears to be a wall.
It's that.
Yeah.
And at this height, it's 4 feet wide at the bottom, and it's narrowing down, and these are through stones every 3 feet. You see them.
Yeah.
And then up here, there's another set of through stones. This one's a through stone, this one's a... So it ties the two
Yeah.
walls together every 3 feet.
Wow.
That is so cool.
Now, where will the wall be raised up? You said you were gonna go about 3 feet higher?
That's the top of the wall there.
Oh, right there.
It'll
So this
continue
whole back-
At that height.
to this granite piece where there'll be another cheek end, I call it. Because you don't need a fence there. You only need the fence to where that stone wall
I
is.
see, yeah.
Because the ground goes down there.
Yeah.
But this part needs that fence. Yeah.
Was this the tree that you were fighting, the roots from this tree?
Yeah. Yeah. And there was a maple tree there too.
Yeah.
Between the two of them, they're growing under here. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yep. Yeah, and our neighbor Robley was good enough to cut these down for us.
Okay, he lives up there, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
He didn't always live up there.
No,
though. That was, Peter Lamb.
Yeah.
And he was a good neighbor to me when I was working on the stone wall up there, because he said, yeah, you can take whatever you want, internal walls. Because he said he's not a sheep farmer, so he doesn't the stone walls.
Yep, yep. I can hear Peter say. It's so funny, because we had some thinning done, and I look across from my kitchen, I look down onto the stream, and then it goes starts to go up the hill, and there's a stone wall that goes across, and when the sun hits it in the afternoon,
Yeah.
and it was buried for 40 years, but we've only had it open for about 5.
Yep.
You know, so that craftsmanship is still the hours, the days, the weeks, the years that it took.
It doesn't get any sun back here. Well, now